The quiet birthday. The rain had just stopped when Keanu Reeves stepped out of his small Los Angeles apartment. The world outside looked washed clean, but the silence in his heart stayed heavy. It was his birthday, yet there were no calls, no parties, no noise, just the soft hum of the streetlights and the faint sound of cars in the distance. He pulled on his old jacket, one he had worn for years, and smiled quietly to himself. No one knew what he planned to do that day. Maybe that was the point. The city was waking slowly, but Keanu didn't want attention. He had always found peace in being unseen. For him, birthdays were not about cakes or wishes. They were reminders of the years that slipped away and the people who never came back. As he walked toward the small cafe on the corner, he passed posters of his own films. Strangers smiled from a distance, unaware that the man behind those pictures preferred silence over fame. He ordered black coffee, the same way he always did. The barista, a young woman with kind eyes, looked up and froze for a moment when she realized who he was. "Oh my God." "You're—" she started, but Keanu gently waved his hand and whispered, "Just Keanu." His voice was soft, almost shy. He paid, left a large tip, and sat near the window. Outside, a little boy and his mother waited for the bus. The boy dropped his toy car, and without thinking, Keanu went outside, picked it up, and handed it back with a warm smile. The mother thanked him, unaware she had just spoken to one of the most beloved stars in the world. Hours passed. People came and went. No one stayed. Keanu watched the world move, feeling the strange comfort of being invisible. He opened a worn notebook from his pocket, a notebook filled with small handwritten notes. On the first page, in faded ink, were 3 words: "Be kind always." Every year he wrote something on his birthday, something only he could read. This year the page stayed blank for a while. He thought about the friends he had lost, River Phoenix, his closest brother in spirit. He thought about his late girlfriend, Jennifer, and their unborn child. Grief had followed him like a shadow, but he had learned to walk with it instead of running away. Still, birthdays had a way of reopening old doors, reminding him of voices he could no longer hear. He got up and left the cafe. The city's lights began to shimmer as evening fell. He walked toward a quiet park where a few children were playing under golden streetlights. One little girl, sitting alone on a swing, reminded him of the daughter he never got to hold. He sat on the nearby bench, watching the small moments of laughter and life happening around him. When the girl's balloon slipped from her hand and floated upward, Keanu stood, ran a few steps, and caught the string just before it drifted away. Her face lit up as he handed it back. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled gently, saying, "Hold it tight this time." The girl's mother thanked him, again unaware of who he really was. As the park lights dimmed, he looked up at the sky, dark, quiet, endless. Somewhere in that silence, he found peace. He whispered softly, "Happy birthday, old man." No cameras, no flashes, no crowd, just one man and the night sky. But just as he was about to leave, something caught his eye. A small homeless man sat near the park gate, shivering in the cold. Keanu walked over, removed his jacket, and wrapped it around the man's shoulders. The man looked up, confused and emotional. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Keanu smiled faintly and replied, "Because someone once did it for me." He didn't say more. As he walked away, a drizzle began again. He didn't rush to cover himself. Instead, he let the rain fall freely, each drop carrying a quiet memory. For him, this wasn't a lonely birthday. It was a reminder of the life he still had, the kindness he could still give, and the hope that maybe, somewhere, the people he loved were smiling too. At midnight, he returned home. His phone stayed silent, but on the table, there was a small package he hadn't noticed before. No name, no note, just a plain brown box. He opened it slowly. Inside was an old photo, him and River, laughing during their early acting days, and a tiny folded piece of paper. It read, "You're never alone when your kindness still lives in others." Keanu sat down, staring at the photo, and for the first time that day, tears filled his eyes. Maybe birthdays weren't about being celebrated. Maybe they were about remembering who you are when no one's watching. The night outside stayed calm. Somewhere far away, a stranger was smiling because of the man who had once handed back a toy, caught a balloon, or shared his jacket. He didn't know it, but his quiet kindness had already circled the world. The stranger's note. The next morning, sunlight slipped gently through Keanu's apartment window. The air smelled faintly of rain and coffee. The brown box still sat on the table beside him, the note open where he had left it. "You're never alone when your kindness still lives in others." He had read those words at least 10 times during the night. They felt warm but mysterious. Who had sent it? No one knew where he lived, at least no one close anymore. He made coffee and sat by the window, quietly observing the city below. Los Angeles looked alive again. People rushing to work, children running to school, birds landing on street signs. He smiled softly. To most people, it was just another morning. But to him, something had changed. That small message in the box had lit a spark inside him. It reminded him that kindness, no matter how small, had its way of coming back, often from directions you never expect. Still, curiosity lingered. He picked up the photo again, the one of him and River Phoenix. Both were laughing, arms over each other's shoulders on the set of their first movie. He remembered that day like it was yesterday. River had said something funny about fame, calling it a mirror that shows everyone except you. Keanu had never forgotten that line. Now, looking at the picture, it felt like River was trying to speak again through the silence of that mysterious box. He decided to take a walk. Sometimes answers came when you stopped searching too hard. He put on a hoodie, a cap, and walked down the street. There was a small bookstore nearby, one of those quiet old places that smelled of paper and time. It had been his hidden refuge for years. The owner, Mr. Carter, an old man with silver hair, greeted him with a smile. "Back again, Keanu? Couldn't stay away." Keanu replied softly, scanning the shelves. He spent hours there, flipping through old books about kindness, loss, and resilience. Something about reading the words of others always made him feel less alone. On the last shelf near the back corner, he noticed a thin journal with a faded leather cover. There was no title, no author name. He opened it and froze. Inside, written in neat cursive handwriting, were the same words as the note from the box. "You're never alone when your kindness still lives in others." His heart skipped. He turned the page and found an entry dated 5 years earlier. It described an anonymous stranger who once gave away his jacket to a homeless man near a park on his birthday. Keanu felt his breath catch. The description matched exactly what he had done the previous night. He closed the book slowly. "How?" he whispered to himself. Mr. Carter noticed his expression and walked over. "Found something interesting?" Keanu looked up. "Where did this journal come from?" The old man shrugged. "A young woman dropped off a box of donations last week. Said her late brother wanted others to read his words. Did she leave a name?" "No. Just said the journal belonged to someone who believed in kindness." Keanu's hands trembled slightly as he flipped another page. There was an unfinished sentence. "If he ever finds this, tell him." But it stopped there. No name, no clue. Only a sense that someone out there knew him in ways even he didn't understand. He bought the journal without another word and walked out, the sunlight hitting his face. On his way home, he passed the same park again. The swings were empty now, but he could still hear the laughter from last night echoing in his mind. He sat on the same bench, opened the journal again, and whispered, "Tell him what?" But the wind carried no answer. A few moments later, a young man approached him shyly. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you Keanu Reeves?" Keanu smiled politely. "I am, yes." The young man looked nervous but determined. "I just wanted to thank you." Keanu blinked, surprised. "For what?" The young man's voice trembled. "Years ago, when I worked at a gas station, you came in one night. I dropped a tray of coffee and burned my hand. I was sure I'd be fired, but you helped me clean up, gave me a tip bigger than my weekly pay, and told my manager it wasn't my fault. That moment changed everything. I promised myself I'd do the same for someone else one day." Keanu was silent for a long moment. His eyes softened. "You did, didn't you?" The young man nodded, tears in his eyes. "I started a small shelter for street kids. It's not much, but your kindness planted the first seed." Keanu shook his hand firmly. That means more than you know. As the young man walked away, Keanu sat back, deeply moved. The mysterious note, the journal, the stranger's words, all of it felt connected somehow. It was as if the universe was gently reminding him that the quiet kindness he had scattered across years had never disappeared. It had simply taken root in others. When the evening sun dipped low, he returned home. On his doorstep lay another small envelope. No name, no stamp. He hesitated, heart beating faster, and opened it. Inside was a small drawing of a park bench, a man sitting alone, and a little girl holding a balloon beside him. Underneath, written in the same neat handwriting as the journal, were the words, "We remember you." He looked around, half expecting to see someone watching, but the street was empty. Just the sound of wind brushing against leaves. He stepped inside, set the note on his table, and sat quietly in the dim light. The mystery deepened, but instead of fear, he felt peace. Whoever was sending these messages didn't want anything. They simply wanted him to know that even his smallest acts had rippled through time. As night fell again, Keanu looked at the photo of River Phoenix, the journal beside it, and whispered, "Maybe this is your doing, brother." Somewhere deep inside, he felt River's laughter again, soft, kind, and eternal. He smiled through tears, whispering to himself, "You never really lose people. They just change how they show up." The girl with the camera. The next morning, Keanu woke before sunrise. For a long moment, he simply sat at the edge of his bed, listening to the faint hum of the city still half asleep. The journal lay open on his nightstand, its worn pages catching the soft light. He had spent most of the night rereading the mysterious entries, trying to piece together the invisible thread connecting them. There was something haunting and beautiful about it. A story of unseen kindness echoing through strangers' lives. He made coffee, then glanced again at the newest note, the drawing of the park bench and the words, "We remember you." That phrase followed him like a melody. Who was we? And why did they remember him? He smiled faintly. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe the meaning was larger than the mystery. But still, a quiet curiosity pushed him to step outside again, to follow whatever signs the day might offer. The park was still empty when he arrived. Mist floated above the grass, and the swings moved gently in the morning breeze. He sat on his usual bench, sipping coffee from a paper cup. Everything felt slower, quieter, as if time itself respected the moment. After a while, a young woman appeared at the far end of the path, carrying a small camera around her neck. She looked nervous, hesitant, almost as if she had been waiting for him. She stopped a few feet away and said softly, "Mr. Reeves?" He turned surprised. "Yes? Sorry to disturb you," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm Lena, I think. You might not remember me." He tilted his head, studying her face. There was something familiar about her eyes. Warm, gentle, but with a sadness that mirrored his own. "Maybe you could remind me," he said kindly. Lena took a deep breath. 5 years ago, I was at the bus stop outside the hospital. It was raining. I had just lost my mother and couldn't afford the bus home. You were sitting near the shelter, and you gave me your umbrella and your last $20. You said, "You'll see sunshine again." I never forgot that. Keanu's expression softened. Memories flickered like light through the fog. He remembered that night faintly. The exhausted young woman holding a soaked photo of her mother, her eyes full of quiet pain. He hadn't known what to say, so he gave what little comfort he could. "You kept going," he said quietly. "That's what matters." Lena nodded, tears glistening. "I did. I started taking photos of small acts of kindness, people helping others without being asked. I wanted to prove that hope still exists in the world. That moment with you changed my life." She hesitated, then added, "And I think the person who left you that note might be connected to this project." Keanu blinked. "What do you mean?" She opened her bag and pulled out a small printed photograph. It showed the same park bench, his bench from last night. The angle, the light, even the shape of the clouds were the same. On the back of the photo was a single sentence written in the same handwriting as the journal. "The man on the bench keeps hearts warm. Keanu stared at it for a long moment, his throat tightening. "Where did you get this?" "It was sent to me," Lena said. "Anonymous. Just like the letters you've been getting, I guess. I didn't know who it was about until I saw you sitting here again. Then I realized it was you." Silence hung between them, filled only by birds and the whisper of wind. Keanu looked at the photo again, his reflection faintly visible in the glossy surface. "Someone's trying to remind us both that kindness matters," he said finally. Lena smiled. "Maybe it's your kindness coming back full circle." They talked for hours about life, loss, art, and healing. Lena showed him more photos she had taken. A man sharing food with a stray dog, a teenager helping an old woman cross the street, a little girl offering half her ice cream to a crying friend. Each photo was raw, honest, full of humanity. Keanu looked at them and said softly, "These are more powerful than most films." Lena laughed quietly. "You helped me believe in this project. I wanted to call it the kindness lens, but I never had the funding." Keanu smiled. "Maybe it's time you do." She looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "Let's do it together," he said simply. "No fame, no names. Just stories that remind people what still makes the world good." For the first time in years, Keanu felt a spark, a purpose deeper than acting or fame. A project that wasn't about cameras or red carpets, but about real people and real hearts. That night, he went home and wrote in his notebook for the first time since the last birthday. Kindness never ends. It only changes who carries it next. He placed the photo from Lena beside River's picture. It felt like the start of something meaningful. But as he turned off the light, he noticed something new under his door. A small envelope with no name again. Inside was a tiny strip of film negative. He held it up to the lamp. The image was faint but unmistakable. Him sitting on that park bench with the little girl from his birthday, the balloon in her hand glowing softly in the evening light. He whispered, half to himself, "Someone's watching kindness unfold." But before he could wonder more, the phone buzzed for the first time in days. An unknown number. When he answered, a familiar but trembling voice said, "Mr. Reeves, this is Detective Roberts. We found something you might want to see. It's about the journal you bought." His heart skipped. "What about it?" "The handwriting matches a missing persons case," the detective said. "A young man who disappeared 3 years ago. His name was Samuel. Samuel Carter." Keanu froze. "Carter?" he whispered. "The bookstore owner's son?" The detective paused. "You know him?" Keanu's voice was soft, almost broken. "I think I'm starting to." The ghost of kindness. The next morning felt heavier than usual. The city outside his window looked the same. Cars moving, people rushing. But for Keanu, everything had changed. The name Samuel Carter echoed in his mind. The son of the old bookstore owner. The man who had sold him the journal. Suddenly, every detail from that quiet shop came flooding back. The way Mr. Carter's hands trembled slightly when he spoke. How his eyes clouded with something unspoken when Keanu mentioned the journal. Now it made sense. The journal wasn't just a forgotten relic. It was a message left behind by a son who had vanished. Keanu got dressed quickly and headed back to the bookstore. The bell above the door jingled softly when he walked in, and the familiar scent of old paper and dust filled the air. Mr. Carter looked up from behind the counter, surprised to see him again so soon. "You're back, Keanu," he said, forcing a faint smile. Keanu nodded gently. "Mr. Carter, I need to ask you something. It's about the journal I bought yesterday." The old man's expression changed. His shoulders stiffened, and the warmth in his eyes dimmed a little. "What about it?" "Your son's name," Keanu said quietly. "Was it Samuel?" Mr. Carter froze. The air between them felt thick. He took a step back, gripping the counter for support. "How do you know that?" "A detective called me last night," Keanu replied softly. "He said the handwriting in the journal matches your son's. I didn't know until then." The old man looked away, his voice trembling. "Samuel disappeared 3 years ago. He was kind. Too kind, maybe, always helping strangers. Said he wanted to document people's kindness before the world forgot how to care." Keanu felt his throat tighten. He did more than document it. He lived it. Tears filled the old man's eyes. "You found his words?" Keanu nodded. Yes, and they've been finding me ever since. Mr. Carter walked around the counter and placed a shaky hand on Keanu's shoulder. Maybe he meant for you to find them. Maybe that was his way of continuing his work. They sat together at the back of the shop, surrounded by quiet shelves and the soft ticking of an old clock. Mr. Carter told him how Samuel had started photographing small acts of kindness in the city. People giving away food, repairing bicycles for free, reading to children in hospitals. One day, he told his father he had found someone who embodied everything good in the world and that he wanted to follow that person's journey. But then, the old man said, his voice cracking, he never came back. Keanu sat in silence, realizing what those words meant. Samuel had been following him. He remembered the small acts over the years, giving away his jacket, helping strangers, visiting children's hospitals quietly. He had never thought anyone noticed, but someone had. Someone who saw not the actor Keanu Reeves, but the man behind the quiet gestures. He was documenting you, Mr. Carter said softly, as if reading his thoughts. He admired what you did when no one was watching. He used to say, if more people were like him, the world would heal faster. Keanu felt tears form behind his eyes. I never knew, he whispered. I didn't even know he was there, Mr. Carter nodded sadly. That was his way. He believed true kindness didn't need to be seen. He said if you noticed him, it would lose its meaning. Keanu's chest ached. The notes, the journal, the film strip, they weren't random. They were Samuel's legacy, his unfinished message. When Keanu left the bookstore, the sky was gray, heavy with clouds. He walked aimlessly through the streets, lost in thought. He passed the park again and sat on the bench, the same one where everything had begun. The mist hung low, wrapping the trees in a ghostly calm. He took out the film strip and held it up to the pale light. He could now see more clearly, a faint outline of another figure standing in the distance behind him in the photo. The person holding the camera. Samuel. You were there, Keanu whispered. You saw it all. Just then his phone buzzed again. It was Lena. Her message read, Come to the pier. I found something. His heart quickened. He walked quickly, the wind biting against his face. When he reached the pier, Lena stood waiting, holding a small box wrapped in brown paper, almost identical to the one Keanu had received on his birthday. Where did you get that? He asked. A man dropped it at my studio this morning, she said. He didn't say a word, just smiled and left. But when I checked the security camera, she paused, swallowing hard. Keanu, it looked like Samuel. The same face from the missing posters. Keanu felt a chill crawl down his spine. That's impossible. She handed him the box. Open it. Inside was a roll of undeveloped film and a note written in the same neat handwriting. The story isn't over yet. You know where to look. Keanu stared at it, confused. Where to look? Lena thought for a moment. Maybe it's a place that mattered to both of you, where he took the photos, where he believed kindness lived. Keanu's eyes widened slowly. He remembered something Samuel's father had said, how Samuel spent most of his time photographing hospitals and shelters. And there was one place Keanu himself had visited quietly for years, a small children's hospital downtown, where he used to read to kids without anyone knowing. I think I know. Where? He said. They drove there together, the rain beginning to fall again, soft and rhythmic. When they arrived, the hospital looked almost the same as he remembered. Tired walls, faded paint, but still alive with the laughter of children. In the lobby, a kind nurse recognized him immediately. Mr. Reeves, she said with surprise. It's been a while. He smiled. I'm here to see someone who might have been here before, a young man named Samuel Carter. The nurse's smile faded. Samuel, she whispered. Yes, I remember him. He volunteered here years ago, always with his camera. He'd sit for hours taking pictures of the children smiling. But one day he left suddenly. We never saw him again. She led them to the art room. The walls were covered with children's drawings, but in the corner hung a single framed photo, black and white, slightly faded. It was of Keanu sitting on the hospital floor surrounded by children, laughing softly as he read from a storybook. Lena covered her mouth in shock. That's you. And below the photo, in small handwriting, were the words, "The man who reminded me what hope looks like." Keanu reached out and touched the glass, his heart heavy and full at once. Samuel had left this behind, not just a mystery, but a message. A reminder that every act of kindness, no matter how quiet, becomes someone else's light. As he turned to leave, he saw something new, a single envelope taped behind the frame. Inside, it was a small piece of film paper and another note. "Thank you for carrying what others drop." His eyes filled with tears. The world felt smaller but warmer. Lena whispered, "Maybe Samuel isn't gone. Maybe he's everywhere kindness still lives." Keanu nodded slowly. Maybe that's what he wanted us to understand. The unfinished letter. The next morning, Keanu woke up to the sound of rain again, soft and steady, like the rhythm of a heartbeat. It had been 3 days since he found Samuel's final note at the hospital. His mind couldn't rest. Every moment felt connected to something unseen, like a thread of kindness stretching across people, years, and places. The more he followed it, the more he understood that this wasn't about him. It was about the quiet force that tied them all together. The journal, the photos, the film roll. All of it had led him to this realization. But one question remained. What happened to Samuel Carter? He sat by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass when his phone buzzed again. It was a message from Lena. "Come to the bookstore. Mr. Carter found something in Samuel's old camera bag." Keanu grabbed his coat and hurried out. The rain soaked his shoulders, but he didn't care. The city streets blurred under the morning light. When he reached the bookstore, Mr. Carter and Lena were waiting at the back table. The old man held a small, weathered envelope. His hands trembled slightly as he handed it to Keanu. "This was in Samuel's bag," he said softly. "It's addressed to you." Keanu stared at the envelope. The handwriting was the same, calm, careful, full of warmth. He slowly opened it. Inside was a folded letter, yellowed at the edges. He began to read aloud. "Dear Keanu, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Maybe you never will. But I've spent the last year following your footsteps. Not as a fan, but as a student. I wanted to understand how someone keeps giving even when life keeps taking. I watched you help strangers, sit beside the sick, share meals with people who could give you nothing in return. I learned that kindness isn't a performance. It's a quiet rebellion against pain. But I'm sick now. The doctors say I don't have long. I didn't want to tell my father. He's already lost too much. So I decided to leave pieces of myself behind, my words, my photos, my heart. Maybe one day they'll find their way to you. Maybe you'll know that your light reached me when the world felt dark. Thank you for reminding me that goodness still exists. If I disappear, don't look for me in the crowd. Look for me in the small things. The laughter of a child, a shared umbrella, a stranger's smile. I'll be there. Samuel." The room fell silent. The sound of rain filled the space between their breaths. Mr. Carter's eyes shimmered with tears. He covered his face, whispering, "I didn't know. My boy didn't want me to worry." Keanu's hands trembled as he folded the letter carefully. He looked at Mr. Carter and said quietly, "Your son didn't disappear. He just left his kindness in all the people he touched." Lena wiped her eyes. "This changes everything," she whispered. "We have to share his story." Keanu nodded slowly. "Yes, but not with fame. Not for headlines. We'll do it his way. Quietly. Honestly." They decided to build something together. A project that would continue Samuel's mission. Lena would use her photography, Mr. Carter would contribute Samuel's writings, and Keanu would fund and guide it. They called it the Kindness Project, a tribute to unseen hearts around the world. For weeks, they worked tirelessly. They visited shelters, schools, hospitals, listening, documenting, and capturing stories of people helping others without expecting anything in return. One night, while editing photos in Lena's studio, Keanu found one that froze him completely. It showed Samuel sitting on the hospital floor beside a sick child, reading aloud from a book. On the edge of the frame, barely visible, was a reflection in a glass door, Keanu's own silhouette in the background. He whispered, "He was there that day." Lena leaned closer. "He followed your acts, not your fame." Keanu nodded slowly. "He saw what I couldn't, that small acts mean more than grand ones. They decided to release the first collection online under Samuel's name, with no mention of Keanu's involvement. The world needed to see the truth without distraction. Within days, the project began spreading across social media. Strangers from all over started sharing their own stories of kindness. Nurses helping beyond duty, students supporting struggling classmates, drivers stopping for lost animals. Thousands of posts carried one message: kindness lives. Keanu watched from afar, avoiding interviews, declining praise. For him, this wasn't about recognition. It was about restoring belief. But one evening, as he scrolled through the comments, he found one that made him pause. It was from an account named Kindness Never Ends. It said simply, "The light is brighter now. Thank you for carrying it." Lena confirmed there was no traceable source for the account. No name, no history, no posts. Keanu just smiled. Maybe that's how Samuel wanted it. Later that week, they organized a small exhibition. No red carpet, no press, just photos, letters, and stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things quietly. The final photo in the exhibit was the one of Keanu on the hospital floor surrounded by children. Beneath it, a plaque read, "He reminded us that the greatest roles are played off-camera." As people walked through the gallery, Keanu stood in the corner, unnoticed. He watched a young boy stop in front of the photo and tug his mother's sleeve. "Mom, I want to be like him," the boy said. "I want to help people." His mother smiled and replied, "Then you already are." Keanu turned away, emotion rising in his chest. Lena walked up beside him and whispered, "This is Samuel's doing. He built something that will never fade." Keanu nodded. "He showed me that kindness doesn't die, it multiplies." When the exhibition ended, Keanu walked alone to the same park bench where everything had begun. The sky was calm, painted in soft gold and gray. He placed a small framed photo of Samuel on the bench and said quietly, "You taught me what it really means to live." He sat there until the streetlights came on. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel alone. When he finally stood up to leave, he noticed something tucked under the bench. Another brown envelope, slightly damp from the rain. Inside was a small note written in familiar handwriting. "You found me. Now help others find themselves." Keanu smiled through tears, looking up at the sky. "I will," he whispered. "I promise." The birthday that wasn't lonely anymore. The morning light was soft and golden when Keanu opened his eyes. A quiet peace rested over his apartment. For a moment, he didn't move. He just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of birds outside. The date on his phone blinked softly beside the bed. It was his birthday again. A year had passed since that night in the park, when he sat alone under the drizzle thinking no one remembered. But everything had changed since then. What began as one quiet evening of loneliness had turned into something far greater. A movement of kindness that had reached across countries, languages, and hearts. His phone buzzed constantly now, but not with the noise of fame. Messages from children's hospitals, teachers, shelters, strangers who had seen the Kindness Project and wanted to help. He didn't reply to all of them, but he read every word. He got up, brewed a small cup of coffee, and looked out at the morning sky. Sunlight touched the city gently, washing it in a soft glow. For once, he didn't feel the ache of emptiness that used to visit him on this day. He felt something deeper. Belonging. The journal lay open on his desk, its pages filled with his handwriting and Samuel's before him. 2 lives, intertwined by quiet acts that neither planned. Next to it sat the final envelope he had found weeks ago, the one that said, "You found me. Now help others find themselves." He had spent every day since then doing exactly that. And today, he wanted to take it further. He packed the journal into a small leather bag and drove across the city to the children's hospital, the same place where Samuel had once taken that photo of him reading to kids. When he arrived, the nurse at the front desk smiled warmly. "Mr. Reeves," she said, "we didn't know you were coming today." He smiled. "It's a special day, and I wanted to spend it where kindness began." The hospital's art room looked brighter than before. Walls once faded, now shimmered with colorful paintings, drawings of hearts, balloons, and smiling faces. In the corner, a small sign read, "The Samuel Carter Creative Room." Keanu smiled softly when he saw it. Samuel's spirit truly lived on here. Children gathered around him quickly, their laughter echoing through the hall. He sat cross-legged on the floor, just like he had years ago, and opened a storybook. As he read, the children leaned closer, eyes wide, some smiling, some resting against his shoulder. Halfway through, a little boy raised his hand. "Mister," he said shyly, "is it true you're famous?" Keanu chuckled. "Some people say that." The boy frowned thoughtfully. "But you don't act like them on TV. Why are you different?" Keanu looked at him gently. "Because kindness doesn't need an audience." The room went quiet for a second before the children clapped and giggled again. The nurse standing by the door wiped her eyes quietly. After story time, Keanu handed the journal to the head nurse. "This belongs here," he said. "It started a journey. Maybe it can start another one." She nodded, holding it as if it were something sacred. "Thank you," she whispered. On his way out, he stopped by the garden behind the hospital. A small plaque stood beneath a cherry tree. Engraved on it were the words, "For Samuel Carter. He taught us that kindness doesn't end. It continues." Keanu placed a hand on the plaque. "You did it, Samuel," he murmured. "You're still changing the world." As he turned to leave, he noticed someone standing by the gate, Lena, smiling softly. She had a small camera slung around her neck, as always. "You came," he said. "Of course," she replied. "I wouldn't miss it. We're uploading the new stories tonight, the next chapter of the Kindness Project. People from over 30 countries have sent in their photos this time." He smiled warmly. "He'd love that," she nodded. "He would. And he'd be proud of you, too." Keanu shook his head gently. "No, I just followed the light he left behind." They walked together toward the car, but before getting in, he looked back at the hospital one last time. Children were waving through the windows, their faces glowing with laughter. It felt like a blessing, like the world itself was whispering thank you. As the sun began to set, they stopped by the park, the same bench where everything had begun a year ago. A small crowd had gathered there quietly. No cameras, no reporters, just people who had been touched by the Kindness Project. A homeless man who once received a warm meal from a stranger, a teacher whose students started a kindness club, a little girl clutching a red balloon, the same kind of balloon from that first birthday night. When she saw Keanu, she ran to him and said softly, "I remembered what you said." "To hold it tight." He knelt down, smiling through misty eyes. "And you did," he said. She handed him the balloon. "It's yours now. For your birthday?" Keanu held it gently, looking up at the sky where the sunset painted everything gold. He turned to the small crowd and spoke softly, his voice trembling with emotion. "A year ago, I thought I was alone. I thought birthdays were just reminders of what I'd lost. But now I see. They're reminders of what still lives in each of you. Kindness doesn't need applause. It only needs courage. And you've all shown me that." The crowd stayed silent for a few moments before soft claps filled the air. Not the kind that came from fans, but from grateful souls. He smiled, tears sliding down his cheeks. "Thank you for reminding me that no one who gives kindness ever stands alone." As the evening turned into night, Keanu walked back to the bench, tied the balloon to it, and whispered, "For River, for Jennifer, for Samuel, for everyone who ever gave without asking." He sat there quietly, watching the balloon sway in the gentle breeze, glowing in the light of the setting sun. Somewhere deep inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. He knew that tomorrow, someone else would find that bench. Maybe they'd notice the balloon, or maybe the small plaque nearby that simply read, "Kindness lives here," and maybe they'd smile without knowing why.